Hey Ben, it's Sam from Indiana. I was calling with a quick question about programming metcons and strength workouts based off of the body weight of an athlete. So, for reference, I'm about 160 pounds. I've got about a double body weight back squat, can deadlift double body weight for multiple reps. Cardiovascular fitness is good, but I'm pretty small. So, if I'm looking at a workout for competitive CrossFit, I'm generally not anywhere near the RX range. Do you think that a smaller athlete could get a similar stimulus during a Metcon by basing weights off their body weight, given that they already have acceptable levels of general strength? I'm thinking maybe along the lines of GPP programming for, let's say, a wrestler or another combat athlete who has to stay in a weight class. If a competitive CrossFit athlete is doing a Metcon and the deadlifts are programmed for 315, if that athlete weighs 200 pounds, would a smaller athlete who's about 150 get a similar stimulus by deadlifting 225 in that same workout, given that they have an acceptable level of base strength? Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. So the first thing I would do is probably ask like a couple clarification questions. Like, is this person a competitive CrossFit athlete? Are they a grappler and compete in those sports? Or are they more general fitness and maybe a hodgepodge, right? And each of those that they're mutually exclusive. Like, you can't be a good CrossFit athlete and also the best MMA athlete at the same time. So you have to figure out sort of what you want. And if you want multiple things, that's fine. You're just not going to be able to optimize for each of those. So I want to kind of answer this a couple different ways. I want to answer it for a competitive CrossFit athlete, for a grappler, and then someone who's maybe a kind of a hodgepodge. So for the competitive CrossFit athlete, like, the sport doesn't have any weight classes, right? So it doesn't matter where you currently are. It matters where you need to be to compete at your best in the sport. If that's your goal, is to compete at the highest level you can, you need to use your, like, basically your body weight as a aspect or as a factor that you can actually weigh into your performance potential, right? So if you are a 160 pound male and you know the average semifinal athlete maybe weighs 195 pounds, okay, you're probably going to start increasing your body weight to get to a point where you can be adequately good at weightlifting movements while preserving some of your gymnastics capabilities, right? And that's going to be something that you have to weigh out. If you're someone who's more of a recreational CrossFit athlete, frankly, it doesn't really matter as much and you can kind of do what you want. And that sounds super negative. I understand that. However, I don't mean it in the negative sense at all. I mean, like, if you get to choose, like, this is just what I'm doing for fun and the goal is for me to enjoy this, then truly, like, you get to do what you want with it. And that's actually super freeing. And I think there should be a lot more people who'd label themselves as recreational, frankly, but it's just, you don't need to put those constraints on yourself. And then it's like, you just choose scales that are appropriate, that preserve the stimulus of the workout, right? Like, what is the intention of this workout? What weight do I need to use that can preserve that same intention, right? And that's going to be different for each workout. So I think that's sort of the lens I would look at if you're a competitive athlete. If you're a grappler, I would say, like, you're probably going to have a weight class, and no different than CrossFit in the sense that, like, you still probably need to manipulate your weight to be ideal for whatever weight class and figuring out what weight class is going to be best, right? So, you might want to move up a weight class because it'll fill out your frame a little bit more. You might want to move down because have shorter limbs or something, right? Like, there's all those different factors that you have to play into deciding where you want to be. Again, assuming that you're trying to compete at the highest level that you can. If you are trying to compete at the highest level you can as a grappler, you shouldn't be doing CrossFit. I think there's probably a place for maybe mixed modal conditioning pieces for training a grappler. However, that's certainly not doing competitive CrossFit programming. I actually had a really good conversation with Georgia Smith. I'll link to that podcast here. But yeah, I mean, I think there are some applications that it can have, but it's more, again, like those mixed pieces that can maybe resemble CrossFit, but they're definitely not training for the competitive side of the sport. So I think we need to separate those two things if that is the goal. Now, lastly, let's say if we have a person and they're like sort of like a two-sport athlete, right? Where they're like, okay, I want to do some, maybe MMA or like BJJ and compete at my best there. And I'm going to use sort of CrossFit as my choice sort of training methodology to help support that. And it's also something that I enjoy, want to be well-rounded at, and also something that, is an aspect of my fitness, right? So this person, again, there's sort of, I wouldn't call it general fitness, but it's definitely more of a broad characteristic. They're not trying to optimize for one specific thing. If that's the case, I still think there's two more potential ways to take this. I think number one, if you're working with an individual design coach, body weight's not even going to be a factor. Well, it's going to be a factor, but it's not going to be more important than any other factor about you as an individual, right? So as your coach is writing your design, they're going to be thinking about, okay, what are your 1RMs? What are your body weight to strength ratios? What is your body weight as a whole? And all of those, like, what is your just conditioning capacity? Like, all the factors that they would already consider. Body weight's going to be one of those factors, and that's just going to go into how they write your design. And you're obviously not going to be scaling it or anything like that because it's written to you as an individual. The second option would be like an online training program, and using that online training program as your supplemental conditioning for maybe your grappling technique or your grappling competitions. So I think this is probably the most likely scenario of what Sam is saying. If this is the case, right, you're doing an online training program plus going and doing BJJ a couple times a week or doing some weekend competitions here and there. If that's the case, yeah, likely that program is probably written to like a semifinal level athlete or even a games athlete. So you have to think about, what can I do to preserve the stimulus of that workout? And I mean, that very well could be using some of your body weight. So for example, let's say it's a 315 pound deadlifts. And again, the average male semifinal athlete might be like 195. You're 160. That's 82% of that. So you could use that, and 82% of 315, you're looking at 255, 260 range. Maybe that's what you use for your workout, right? And that's, again, it doesn't have to be perfect because you're not trying to really optimize that hard for CrossFit anyway. So it's like, hey, this is good enough. This will work. And you can kind of use it that way. Or what you could do, which is probably what I would recommend, is figuring out again, what is the intention of the workout, right? So if I think probably a good example would be, we did the name game the other week, and the workout was the Riddler. It was 27 shuttle runs, 21 line facing burpees, 15 deadlifts at 315, 205 for ladies. Rest 1 minute, and then 15 deadlift, 21 line facing burpee, 27 shuttle run. So we recommended, obviously the RX rate was 315 or 205, but we recommended that people could do the workout between 5 and 2 sets. So at the very least, it would be triples, if not breaking like one time. We also assigned a scale to that. So it was 315, 205, or 80%, whichever was less. For example, if your max is 385, 80% of that is 308 pounds. You would use that 308 or 310. If your max was 425 pounds, then 80% of that is 340. So you'd round down to the 315 RX weight. So ideally, you have a program that is actually tailoring the scales to whatever your appropriate level is. And if not, maybe you could use, again, maybe a mixture of figuring out, okay, on these absolute strength movements, this is typically where I'm at relative to the type of athlete that they're programming for. So this is the type of load that I should be doing. But even then, I would probably argue that, it's more about thinking about preserving the intention behind that workout rather than just trying to hold to a blindly prescribed weight.